Well, I'm excited, you guys. I've got an amazing guest for you today. I was fortunate to come across Catherine Clinton's new book, brand new, actually. It just came out yesterday, which may not be yesterday by the time you listen to the podcast, but it's brand new. It's called Optimize. And I don't remember how I came across it. It might have been a PR agent or something, but when I read the introduction and looked at the topic, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And then I looked through the whole book and kind of browsed through it and saw that she's hitting on all sorts of the topics that I think are very, very important. And so not only have I read the first 100 pages and scanned through the rest of it, but I bought a copy for each of my instructors for their New Year's gift, which I'm excited for them to read. And I think Catherine's done a fantastic job of synthesizing a lot of often hard for people to understand material, such as biophotons, water science, mitochondria science, breath science, grounding, the electromagnetic aspects of the body and the earth, and just things that I think everybody needs to know about. But what I really am very grateful for is Catherine's ability to synthesize very complex concepts into a book that's very readable and very well outfitted with diagrams to make things easy to understand. And I'm just super excited you're here, Catherine. Welcome.
Paul, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your generous spirit. Thank you
You're
so much
welcome.
for inviting me on. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Me too. And I just, like I said, I was reading your book and I'm thinking, wow, she's got to know these topics pretty well to synthesize this down so that it's understandable to most people. I've been studying all of these concepts for a very long time. And most of the books that I have on things like biophoton emission and mitochondria and research, they're very technical. Very few people would ever understand them. But I think you did a fantastic job. I think anybody genuinely interested could understand your book and learn a hell of a lot. And I thought, well, if nothing else, I need to expose Catherine and her new book to people because it could take them 5 lifetimes to put all these pieces together that you've put together. And so to begin with, Catherine, what I would love to do and what I typically do with all my guests is I want everybody to kind of get a sense of who you are as a person and what shaped you, what inspired your career and even your worldview. So maybe you can take us on a journey of your life and what led you to becoming an osteopathic physician and what got you into quantum biology. And I understand you have an institute that teaches quantum biology.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. We started the Institute last year. We just did our first research study with 34 participants on heart coherence affecting mitochondrial function. So I'm
Oh, that's
really,
amazing.
yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to finally start doing some of the research I wanted to see, right? So,
Right. You
but
mentioned heart coherence. Just in case you don't know, I have an excellent podcast with Roland McCready from the chief scientist at HeartMath.
he's wonderful,
He's an
isn't he?
amazing guy. So
Yeah.
if anyone listening hasn't listened to that, it's a great podcast to give you an example of HeartMath research. But I have a long history of using HeartMath technology, probably going back to when their first book came out and the freeze framer. And so I'm very familiar and I'm grateful you're doing a study like that. It'll be very interesting. I can't wait to see it. Make sure you let me know what the outcome is.
Oh, I definitely will. I definitely will. And I appreciate the chance to let people know a little bit about who I am and how this story sort of unfolded. I was a very shy kid in school, and my sister was doing martial arts, and
Mm.
my older sister. And so I really looked up to her and wanted to do Taekwondo, which is what
Mm.
she was doing. And I got started early on, became very competitive, went to Olympic trials.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
didn't
impressive.
the Olympics is a little more impressive, but I
Well,
didn't.
even to get there, I was in Taekwondo for several years myself, so I know exactly what you're up to.
Yeah, yes, you do then.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it's a small sport, right? So Olympic trials in Taekwondo is a very small sport. But when I was doing that, I was teaching classes at the dojang, and two of these incredible kids had this incredible mother, and she would come in and the energy would just change. And I
Mm.
was in college when she came to a class to actually give a lecture on what she did. I had no idea all those years, but she was a traditional midwife. And I went up
Mm.
to her after class and said, I never knew you did this. This is so incredible. And she said, well, I'm going on a visit right now. Come with me.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, yeah. And that was my first introduction to natural medicine. And she is incredible. She's still doing midwifery, but she also does quantum healing. And she was my first introduction to not only natural medicine, my parents tended towards natural remedies, but the idea of using energy. I
Mm.
remember being in some difficult births, and she would go outside, take off her shoes, and I was like, "Wait, what are you doing? Like, there's a birth happening. Why are we doing this?" And she was like, "I'm getting the energy I need. I'm getting the guidance I need." And it really changed the way I look at the world and the way I look at health. And I knew pretty much right away, I assisted with her for 6 years,
Wow.
but I knew right away that I'm not a midwife.
You
There,
have to have a certain personality for that. It's like being a surgeon or something.
yep,
You be ready for
absolutely.
anything.
Yes, totally. And you are always on. That open
Yes.
sign is always up. And I knew that's not the cloth I was cut from. So
Mm.
I went to naturopathic medical school. And well, actually, I had to go back because I got my undergrad degree in philosophy.
Oh,
So
cool. I love
yeah, yeah,
philosophy.
me too. Me too. Totally. I was trained to dissect and argue and, explore ideas. So, I had to actually go back and get all my pre-med requisites.
Mm.
Actually, in organic chemistry, one of my professors said, "I don't wanna know what you think. I want you to put the right answer down. I
Oh,
want you
that's
to
so
do."
silly.
It is silly, but
Yeah.
that's how you pass the class. So
Yeah.
I went to naturopathic medical school at the National University of Natural Medicine, and my second year, I got really sick.
Oh.
It was that initiation year, really
Mm.
long hours, sign the
Mm.
attendance sheet. If you don't come on time, you have to take the class over the next year, that
Mm.
weed out year.
Yeah.
And I got sick. I was
Mm.
diagnosed with 2 autoimmune conditions, Lyme disease. I started having panic attacks. It was just this domino effect
Mm.
in my health, and I was in the perfect place to get better. I was, at this natural healing university. I was right down the hill from an allopathic teaching college. The university I was going to had a dual program, so there was Chinese medicine there.
Mm. Great.
But there was still something missing. I was able to become productive again. I was able to go to classes, do my clinic shifts. I became well enough to become a productive member of society again, but I wasn't healthy. I
Right.
I, I was still sick, and that's when I discovered this expanded view of health and healing through quantum biology, through an energetic perspective. And it was actually the physician that I was doing clinical rotations under. She said, you should look at psychoneuroimmunology, just a
Mhm.
big word for how our thoughts and emotions impact our health. And
Mhm.
she was right. And I think somewhere in our conversations, you mentioned diving into the research of mitochondria in the 90s.
Mhm.
And that's exactly where I was, right? It was new, it was emerging, it was exciting. And I thought that's where I'm going to get healthy. And I saw
Mm.
this crossroads between our thoughts and emotions, between mitochondrial health, between these quantum effects happening in living systems, because at the same time, there was new and emerging research coming out about quantum mechanics in living systems, something that
Mhm.
was thought impossible before.
Yes.
So it's just been a really exciting rabbit hole, and I'm not ready to climb out yet.
No. So how long ago was it that you started getting into the mitochondrial research and kind of making your shift toward quantum biology?
Around 2000.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's been good. You've got a lot of experience now.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was sick and struggling, so a lot of the information didn't stick. I would have to
Mhm.
go back um, and relearn and reinvestigate, but absolutely, and this is something that I think a lot of one of the things I love about quantum biology is that this is new and emerging research, but it's not new to us as humans, right? It
Right.
echoes what ancient cultures have always spoke of. And
Mhm.
so it's exciting to see some explanation about it, but it's
Mhm.
definitely not a new topic of how we can use energy, light, sound,
Mhm.
vibration, our thoughts,
Mhm.
energy to have us be healthy.
It just gives the left brainers a reason to look into the things that are obvious.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where I was. I was that
Mm.
left brainer that
Mm.
needed something to sink my teeth into and say, "Okay, I can do this."
Mhm.
So yeah, that's where it got its start.
What I'm curious, what was it that you did that you would say made the difference to get you from being, surviving and being able to function, but not really being in and full with yourself?
Mhm.
What was the transition for you? What when you look back, what was it that it's because I did this that I got out of the rabbit hole of not feeling so good?
Yeah. Well, at the time, I was really, really sick. So there was a stint of about 2 to 3 months where I used pharmaceuticals, and I was using steroids, to stop some of the, intense symptoms. So I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and Hashimoto
Oh, yeah, that's terrible.
thyroiditis. It was pretty bad, yeah,
Hmm.
and they wanted to do surgery, and so I did use, pharmaceuticals for a while. I did use nutrition, I used lifestyle, but the things that really kind of opened my eye to this expanded understanding were really simple. They were humming, chanting,
Hmm. Hmm.
that had an enormous impact that I certainly wasn't expecting. I was very much attached to that chemical model, right? Like, what
Hmm.
supplement do I take? What kind of diet should I be doing? And I think also that psychoneuroimmunology piece, how
Hmm.
my thoughts, just telling myself, I'm safe, you're
Hmm.
safe was incredibly, paradigm shifting for my biology. What happened to my inflammation just by telling my body that I was safe was
Hmm.
incredible, and it
Hmm.
was instantaneous, that
Yeah.
change. So those things were really important for moving the needle, and, of course, circadian biology was really important. I was the
Yes.
type to be staying up late,
Yeah.
get up at 11. I was doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had my share of serious circadian problems because Penny and I traveled the world for 25 years, lecturing nonstop all over the world. And I got to the point where I was so circadian confused. I just
Mhm.
couldn't function anymore. No matter how good I ate or how much Tai Chi I did or breathing or anything, I just reached a tipping point. And to this very day, it's been years now, and I still just the thought of getting on an airplane makes me feel like I pushed myself so far into that imbalance that I really still need time to recover.
Mhm.
25 years on airplanes is a lot, and if I wasn't as strong as I was and didn't have the skills that I had, I probably would have died on the road.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with someone yesterday about that resilience as it's like a bank account for your health,
It is.
right? Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned humming and chanting. Are you familiar with Jonathan Goldman?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a cool guy, and I've got a phenomenal podcast with him. So if I think you'd really love to hear what he talks about, because he had just written his new book on humming when I did the podcast with him. And I've got a lot of his music. I listen to it all the time. I use it in plant medicine ceremonies, and he's just a cool guy.
Yeah.
So that's one to check out. And for everybody listening, if you haven't listened to my podcast with Jonathan Goldman, he's one of the foremost sound healers in the world, and he's an amazing musician and just a cool human being. He's got a series on Gaia too, I believe. But yeah, that's all that, these things seem so sort of, they don't seem very powerful, but they really, really are powerful. And especially if you make a habit of doing them regularly.
Yeah.
I think that's, people that just think they can just chant or hum themselves out of the flu don't realize that, it takes a while to bring a body into resonance and harmony that's been out of harmony for a while. So you have to have some commitment to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what is so exciting. One of the things that's so exciting about a quantum biology approach to health is the research showing how profound it is. That is the first layer before the chemical layer, right? It's exciting.
Well, we've used this term quantum biology several times, and certainly you and I are hip to it, but I think it'd be great to give the audience an overview of what it is and, help them understand, what you came to understand, so that as we're talking about quantum biology, people really got a sense of, I understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. We're familiar with biology, we're familiar with quantum physics, but the marriage of the two is relatively new. And there's exciting research out there. I mean, quantum biology really started when quantum physics was brought into the scientific realm, but it really gained evidence for decades and decades. Everyone said there's no way for it to happen in living systems. We're too chaotic. And quantum biology is the study of quantum mechanics, quantum tunneling, where something goes through an obstacle instead of around, quantum superposition, where it can take multiple paths, quantum entanglement, where things are not connected. They're separated by distance, but they are still intimately connected and dependent, quantum coherence. That was the one that really excited me. And quantum biology, to make it simple, it is the study of waves, waves that hold energy and information. So we're talking about light, we're talking about sound, we're talking about electrical, magnetic, scalar, electromagnetic fields, our thoughts and intentions. We're talking about
the spiritual dimension.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the wave dimension.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that quantum biology, although there are definitely quantum biologists out there in research labs that would scoff at this, but I think it does a beautiful job of marrying science and spirit. And I think that has been missing for a long time, and it's hurt our health.
Well, there's lots of quantum physicists that say that quantum physics doesn't apply to psychology either, but that's very short-sighted. It's like, have you looked at your own results yet?
Yeah, definitely. And just there's sort of these two different camps in quantum physics, right? The idea that we have an atom and we have a nucleus, a proton and a neutron with these electrons that orbit it or that are in a cloud, and it's very particle based.
Yeah.
Then we have the quantum physics that I lean towards, that there aren't those particles. There are waves of energy, and those
probabilities.
Yep, absolutely. And they give rise to what we see around us.
Yeah.
And so that's where I lean, for sure.
Hi, everybody. I know that you're all aware of the importance of vitamin C. There's a mountain of research on it, but not all C is created equally. I love Paleo Valley's Essential C Complex because it is the real deal, bioavailable. And I wanted you to hear right from Autumn Smith, founder of Paleo Valley, why their Essential C Complex is so unique and something you definitely want for your family and your children. Autumn, tell us about your Essential C Complex.
Well, I was shocked to learn as a holistic nutritionist that 90%, over 90% of the vitamin C on the market is derived from genetically modified corn and then is processed with highly volatile acids. And so I knew I had to find a better way to get all of the powerful benefits of vitamin C. So what I did was I dove into the research and I found the three most vitamin C rich superfoods on the planet. That's unripe acerola cherry and camu camu and amla berry. And then I just packed them into capsules. And the benefits are amazing because you're not only getting vitamin C, but all of the other wonderful benefits that come from these amazing superfoods.
To get your Paleo Valley Essential C to help support a healthy immune system and get 15% off, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% savings.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think all this stuff's so important. And, I've interviewed a lot of people that talk about the kind of the divide, but this is common in almost all aspects of science. And then you get spiritual and religious people that go completely the other way, and they don't believe in anything from science. So you get heavy right brain, heavy left brain, and our job is to bring people to the middle.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's one of my sayings I created for my students is I ask them the question, how do you live in the Tao? And they typically give all sorts of answers. I says, it's pretty simple. Not too much and not too little. Not too much of anything, not too little of anything. That's the path of the Tao.
Yep.
Well, when it comes to the electric body, which you've got a lot of great information on, that's something I've been studying for a long time. So as I was writing up my outline for you, I ran into my library just to kind of scan some of the books that I had. And one of the original books that I read that was probably one of the pioneering books on the electric body is The Fields of Life, Our Links with the Universe by Harold Saxon Burr. I read, I think, 2 or 3 of his books. One was called The Blueprint for Immortality, which was fantastic. And I know that the one I saw, the one I looked at had a published date of 1973, but I know a lot of his books went all the way back into the late 40s and early 50s. Mm-hmm. He was doing some groundbreaking research on water in the late 40s that, if published today, would shock people. Mm-hmm. But most people, even every water expert I've ever talked about, didn't know about his research. But maybe if we have a time later, we can get into that. But I have talked about it before. Then Robert Becker's book, The Body Electric, came out. And I think that was early 90s. Mm-hmm. And then Jerry Tennant, with his book, Healing is Voltage, was a real big jump up, I think, for understanding the voltage of the cell. And he even did a book on the acupuncture meridians and how that works electrically. Mm-hmm. And then Eileen Day McCusick's book, The Electric Body, Electric Health, is a fantastic book. She's been on my podcast as well, and I've used her system for tuning forks for quite some time. It's very, very good. Mm-hmm. And then I think one of the most important books anyone should ever read is Arthur Firstenberg's book, The Invisible Rainbow. I think that's not so much about what we're going to talk about today, but it's more about, as you know, the negative effects that can happen if you get around, power lines and circuit boards and Wi-Fi systems and radio towers and television broadcast stations and radars. But what he shares in there, I think, should be on every news station all day, every day.
Absolutely.
And so then your book seems to be a synthesis of all this great work, plus Gerald Pollack's work on the electrical nature of our cells and the body and how water affects that. So what I'd love is if you could give us an overview of the electrical nature of the cells, our body as a whole. And I think one thing I'd like you to elaborate on, because I know this is confusing for a lot of people, is what specifically a negative electrical charge is. And maybe you can talk about the AC and DC systems of the body, because I think also that one confuses people, is how can we have an AC and a DC system in our body? Mm-hmm. But you have so much in your book, maybe just see where your heart wants to go and kind of paint a picture for us so people can understand these basic principles. I think very few people today, even in the healthcare profession, actually have an awareness of ourselves as electrical beings.
Sure. I mean, I love this topic. So stop me
No,
if I
no,
go
go
on
rock and
too
roll,
much.
baby. I'm here. I get to hear it from you directly. It's even more fun.
It is fun. It is so fun because we are taught that the body's chemical mechanical, right?
Mhm.
And in quantum biology, we understand that this idea that we have biomolecules and enzymes floating around randomly until they find their receptor match, unlock the receptor, and action happens. We're trillions and trillions of cells, each one with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of things happening, actions each second. Mathematically, that's impossible. And when we're
Mhm.
talking about the body as an electric being, then we start to understand, okay, there are things happening here that are much faster, much more efficient than that chemical mechanical model. Not that it doesn't exist, but this electrical capacity of the body. There's a way to look at the body where pain, inflammation, symptoms, disease state are a lack of negative charge.
Mm.
And we're going to talk about electrons. So we
Mm.
have electrons, this negative electrical charge, and we have protons. So when I plug an appliance into the wall, I get a flow of electrons. And we'll go into this a little bit more because there's a misnomer there. But that's what we talk about as electricity. The flow, the movement of electrons, of these negatively charged particles, or this negatively charged field,
Yes.
creates energy. And that's what powers our refrigerators and our computers, right? And we have that in our body as well. So there is this innate negative electrical charge that we see in all of our cell membranes. And, it's anywhere from -30 to -120. But that potential, that negative electrical potential, and we're talking like a number line, right? I know when we
Mhm.
say negative and positive, there's that connotation of good and bad.
And just for the audience, are you talking microvolts, millivolts, volts?
Millivolts. Yeah.
So 1/1000th of a volt.
Yeah. Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
It's a very small charge. There's a concept I teach called MENS, minimal electrical neuromuscular stimulation, to describe how the cells function. Because I think a lot of people don't really have a sense of, well, how much of a charge are we talking about here? We know that the wall puts out 110 or 120 or, things like that. But I think one of the things about the body is that, when you get to like look at the voltage output of a mitochondria, just once you add them all up, it turns out to be that we're producing, this takes more energy to keep our body together than the sun's making every day.
It is absolutely incredible. It's mind blowing when it comes down to it. And what we're talking about is, so let's go back to plugging those appliances into the wall. There's this idea that when we plug those things into the wall, those electrons are flowing like water in a hose.
Mm-hmm.
And once they reach the appliance, then we have energy. But that's not all that's happening. Those electrons are moving very small distances, and they're creating an excitation. And that creates this electromagnetic field,
Mm-hmm.
these waves that hold energy and information. That's why we can put our phone on a charging pad and we don't have to plug it in,
Right.
or our toothbrush, because the energy and information is held in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And what we see is that our cells not only have this electrical potential, this negative electrical charge, but that field that emanates from them is so foundational for how they function. That electromagnetic field that a cell creates, and every cell has its own unique electromagnetic field. It dictates their behavior, it
Mm-hmm.
dictates their movement, it dictates how a stem cell becomes an ear or an elbow. It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely essential. In that field, there's energy and information held. And when we start to lose that negative electrical charge, When we become more positive in our electrical charge, then we start to see things like pain, inflammation, symptoms. Our cells lose that communication. So they've seen this in immune cells. They've seen this with cancer cells, where there's a loss in that negative electrical charge, and it creates a dysfunction in the communication that's happening between immune cells. That's one of the things that seems to be associated with autoimmune conditions, that the communication gets messed up between the electrical communication, and then the immune system thinks, okay, we've got to do this because there's a loss of charge. Same thing with cancer. They've shown that when a cell loses its negative electrical charge, it starts rapidly dividing and looking like a cancerous cell. And this is the work, I mean, you mentioned some incredible pioneers, but this is the work currently of Michael Levin and his work out of Tufts University. And he is prolific. He is putting out 20, 30 research papers each year. It's really incredible to look at his work because he's really looking at the body as a bioelectric being. And one of my favorite researchers in this area is Albert St. Georgi.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible researcher and scientist. He was given the Nobel Prize for his work with vitamin C. And his view on the body is that we don't just run on food. More important than that, we run on the flow of this negative charge. And when we back away from this idea of electrons being water in the hose or little billiard balls, it's a field of energy. And when we can embed ourselves in that energy, the healthier that we can be. And you know so well, this looks like what we eat. It looks like the water we're drinking. It looks like movement. It looks like getting outside, putting our feet on the ground, breathing. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to keep our charge up, and you do a great job of covering them in the book. And I show a lot in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. You made me think of a comment from Einstein. Einstein once said, "The field is the sole governing agency of the particle," and that's very true. And isn't it correct that when we start getting a positive charge, there's a correlation with pH balance? I've found that when people are acidic, that their pH tends to be very acidic. Their body starts dropping below a 7 pH as a general balance, and you start seeing, that coupled with inflammatory conditions, joint aching, and a whole pile of health conditions. I don't remember if you said that in your book or not, but you probably did.
Yeah, yes, you're right on. There is an association with pH in the body. There's an association, of course, with our mitochondria and redox balance. And really what we're looking at is health as a surplus of this negative electrical charge, a surplus of electrons. And our mitochondria are associated with that. The water in our body is associated with that. Our environment, both external and internal, have a massive role on what our electrical architecture looks like in the body.
And maybe you can elaborate on the AC-DC connection. I remember reading Robert Becker's descriptions of the perineural system as a DC system. How can you maybe just elaborate what's AC, what's DC, and maybe for those that aren't familiar with these concepts, you could expand on what AC is versus DC for them.
Definitely. Well, those are acronyms for alternating current and direct current. And what we see in the body, in the nervous system, is that there's a conversation happening, that the flow doesn't go in just one way, that it's back and forth, that there's this alternating current. And that's what is happening when we plug an appliance into the wall. There's this alternating current, and that is enough to create that excitation and to move energy, to create a field. And we see that in the body. And then what Becker was talking about, this DC current where negative flows to positive, that there is this flow of energy, predictable flow that holds its own information. And his work, he was looking at a host of different things, regrowing limbs in salamanders. And I mean, Levin is doing the same thing with worms, salamanders, even with digits on human fingers in
Wow,
hopes.
that's new.
Yeah, absolutely. In hopes of maybe finding that current that will allow for health and regeneration. And they're finding that specific electrical currents. So when we talk about hertz, we're talking about that synodal wave that is counted for that measurement of what the strength of that current is. And they're finding that specific frequencies, electrical frequencies, help our wounds heal at a much faster rate, help our bones heal at a much faster rate. And of course, they're doing this with humans, but early research was with salamanders and how you can put a different electrical current in, really with like a clip, right? An electrical clip where you apply that electrical current to that missing limb, and that energy and information is held in the electrical field so that that salamander will regrow that limb. And Levin has continued this work. He has gotten really sophisticated. One of the research studies that is really fascinating to me was he was looking at planarian worms. So anytime you cut these worms, they will regrow whatever's missing. So if you take a worm and you cut it in half, the half with the head will regrow the tail. The half with the tail will regrow the head. And he's looking at currents, and he took a worm and was able to create a worm cut in half and not grow the tail, but regrow that head, just because that was the electrical current applied. And really that's sort of a gruesome example of how incredibly intelligent these electrical fields can be. They hold energy, yes, we know that, but they also hold information that can guide cellular biological action.
I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. I sure am. By now, most everyone has heard of the healing power and wide variety of nutritional benefits we gain when taking Shilajit minerals. As good as it is, it doesn't taste good at all. Imagine eating rotting rocks that have passed the due date. You're probably about right. But there is an exceptional way I get my daily doses of Shilajit that tastes fantastic. That's Organifi's Shilajit gummies. The texture and consistency of the gummies is excellent, and they have just enough natural sweetness to make me feel like I'm getting a lovely, healthy treat that both my body and mind can enjoy. The only problem with Organifi's Shilajit gummies is that you have to hide them when friends are around, and the kids too, or you'll go through 2 bags in no time. Shilajit is a unique mineral paste from the Himalayan mountains. It contains an abundance of trace minerals, antioxidants, organic acids, and nutrient-transporting compounds. It has been known throughout history to boost vitality and strength. Just pop a couple of gummies in and chew or suck them slowly for a steady release of the delicious, earthly, but slightly sweet natural flavor. Your taste buds will enjoy the delicious treat while your body soaks up massive amounts of feel-good nutrition. Rich with fulvic acid, humic acid, vitamins, enzymes, bioflavonoids, antioxidants, metabolites, and over 40 trace minerals. Shilajit gummies can help support energy production, support performance and recovery, support healthy muscles, promote collagen synthesis, promote healthy hormone levels, increase cellular energy, decrease fatigue, promote health. I absolutely love Organifi Shilajit gummies, and I love knowing that there's something sweet that I can eat that doesn't come with all the challenges most sweet stuff does. If you'd enjoy something tasty that enhances nutrient variety, delivers the minerals your body needs, and helps you look and feel great, don't wait. Get your Shilajit gummies now. Hint, don't just buy one bag because they'll be gone before you know it. Get your 20% Spirit Gym discount on your Shilajit gummies. Go to Organifi.com/Chek20. That's Organifi, ORGANIFI.com/Chek20 to get your 20% discount on these amazing nutritious gummies. Have you, by chance, ever read the book Source Code Investigations by David Wilcock?
I have not.
I think you would find it fascinating because he has a pile of Russian research and even, I think, from China, all doing exactly this. For example, he showed that, I don't remember, I think it was Russian researchers, might have been Chinese, but they were able to take a duck egg, put it next to a chicken egg, and run an electrical current through it. And then when the chicken hatched, it was half duck and half chicken. And they can go either direction by running the current through it. They were able to cause things like frogs to grow multiple arms and legs. There's piles of this research that most people in the West don't know about. And they're literally like almost creating completely new creatures by mixing all these different species through electrical current. But anyhow, David Wilcock, the Source Code Investigation, you can get it on audiobook if you want something easier to engage. It's a pretty big book, but it's loaded with exactly this kind of research. And it shows you this has been going on for a long time, but a lot of it's just been done in faraway places in dark basements. And I was just going to say, for the listener, when she's talking about alternating current, if you think of a sine wave, it alternates between positive and negative. So it's alternating polarity, and that's what's generating the field. So if you just think of a typical sine wave or like a wave in the ocean would be the ground state. But when the wave comes up, that would be positive. You see it right there. But in the electrical sense, it would be a negative wave that you can't see. So that's the direct current doesn't have that waving motion. It's more like water flowing through a hose.
Perfect description. Yeah.
I used to repair weapon systems in Cobra helicopters and went to electronics school for a year. And believe me, it was one of the hardest things on my brain I've ever done.
It is hard. I took some electrical engineering just through Coursera. It's a online thing that you can audit classes because it was really a hard subject. And I knew how important it was. So I wanted to understand it better. But it is a pretty massive field.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I joined the military in 83. I got out in 86. I spent 2 of those 3 years as a fighter and as trainer of the Army boxing team. But the first year was electronic school. So I was only in my unit for a short period of time. The training was the hard part. Being in the unit wasn't hard at all. But the training was very, very intense. And I had to go to math school for 2 months to get my math skills high enough that would even let me into electronic school. So, and I'm not a guy that gravitates towards math. So being in math school 8 hours a day is enough to squash my brain. I would feel exhausted every day. But yeah, there's a lot to it. And I could tell lots of stories, but it's just, this is why I'm kind of trying to elaborate with some of these things so people can have a visual of what an alternating current is. And that we can thank Nikola Tesla for. He was the one that gave us that technology. Now, when it comes to the source of bioelectricity, human healers are often drawing energy from non-local sources to enhance the electrical systems within the body. And I looked through your book, and I might have missed it, but I couldn't find anything in the book about the source of the electricity that enlivens nature and the human body. So what does quantum biology say about non-local sources of electricity, or what is creating electricity, such as a scalar field or related concepts? Because I think that's important. I tell you, just as a side note, are you familiar with the Electric Universe group?
Yes.
And the Thunderbolts Project? I had Walt Thornhill on my podcast twice. And, you know, I love the theory. I've studied a lot of their work and countless of their lectures. And I think there's a lot right about the electric universe. But, you know, he would be talking about planets and stars and talking about them, how they're in circuits and flows. But I said to him, Walt, you know, every electrical circuit has to have potential. You're talking about mega trillions of volts when you're talking about galactic energy flows. The question I have is, where is the potential to drive that much energy? And interestingly enough, he said, I don't know. Nobody does. So even in the electrical universe, you still come up against this invisible impasse where you got a very elaborate theory built on a question mark, which is the problem with almost every theory of everything. I've studied over 37 theories of everything, and not one of them can substantiate origins. So what I'm asking you is, what have you learned about, or what do you feel is the source of some of these electrical currents, either in nature or in ourselves? And what have you learned, or what are your thoughts on non-local sources? One of them being the scalar field, that I'm familiar with.
That's where it gets fun for me, Paul,
Good.
because we don't know. We don't know. And I touch a little bit on in the book about how this is an idea that goes back as far as written history.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of source, the idea of potential. And of course, quantum physics has cloaked this in terminology like the 0 point field,
Mm-hmm.
or the quantum field, the unified field.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I go through in the book all the different ancient cultures and their ideas of a field. And this idea of potential is so exciting, and I think it's missing actually from so many people's lives, this faith in the unseen. And I think when we're talking about bioelectricity, when we're talking about the biofield, for example, people love to put it in the box of electromagnetic. That's what it is. Well, okay, yes, and it's something else, right? These scalar waves that can perpetuate without resistance. These descriptions of a field of all potential. I love the work of the Vedic texts and how they describe this sort of field of everything from which matter comes and then collapses back into. And I think that, you know, when I get down to it, because I love to look and research and try to figure out, what is that? Where does that come from? What is that potential? How do we name it? How do we test it? How do we touch it? How do we know about it? And I think that at the end of the day, that I come to the conclusion that maybe this is just a practice in awe. Maybe we are never meant to touch it and know it. Maybe we are meant to embrace it. Maybe it is a practice in this incredible experience that we are having in this plane as humans, and that all potential, that source energy, that unified field, that is a incredibly potent idea for us to dwell on. I mean, talk about philosophy. That's where it gets fun, is to look at these ideas, because we don't know. And quantum
Mm-hmm.
physics, I think they come up with some fancy names for it, the 0 point field, and it's exciting when you look at the measurements and the mathematics. There is something there that we can't describe, we don't have an understanding of, but it is necessary. That
Mm-hmm.
mathematic piece is necessary for matter to exist. And I talk about that in the book, but we don't know. We don't know that source. And are we supposed to, is another question. Are we supposed to have a full grasp of what it means to be here and to be conscious? It's like the debate on what is consciousness. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's
I think the
exciting.
answer to what is consciousness will ultimately lead to the answer to what is the source potential that is creating everything. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I'd love to give you a guest pass to explore Spirit Gym, because I go into this quite deeply and give models based on my own spiritual experiences and spiritual investigations and research. But one of the things that I think we can look at is dimensional models. For example, if you use a simple model, you can start off at a line, or you can go to the 0 dimension, which starts at a point, because a point really has no mass like a photon. And if you take 2 points and couple them together, you've got a line or a plane. And then you make a square like a piece of paper, you've got a second 2 dimensions. Or if you go 0, 1 line, square, 2 dimensions. And then you go 3 dimensions, length, width, depth. And if you want to go up to the 4th, you can call it time. But like, we can't put our hands on time. We create these arbitrary measuring devices, and we all just agree a second is this long and an hour is this long. But you can't really grab time. You can't measure it. You can't say, here's how much it weighs. So there you can see that the dimension of time in this model is flowing down into the lower 3 dimensions, because everything there is evolving. It's being created. It's being dissolved. Like life emerges, it lives through a cycle, it decays and goes back. So there you could say, we could look at time just with the cycle of birth, life, and death. We'd say, okay, there's something happening here that seems to go in a sequential order. But you may not realize what time is. But you know that this is what happens in life. So the point I'm making is, you can't see the 4th dimension, but it's pouring down into the 3rd dimension, the 2nd dimension, the 1st dimension, because they're all building on each other like Russian dolls. And having looked at many different dimensional models, it seems to me that, well, for example, we have this belief that the speed of light is, what is it, 186,000 miles a second or something like that. So we have this belief that that's the speed limit, and a lot of people don't believe anything can move faster than the speed of light. But William A. Tiller, you familiar with William A. Tiller?
I don't think I am.
Oh man, you got to get the book Science and Human Transformation. It'll blow your mind. Okay. William A. Tiller was a famous, highly celebrated scientist, but he got very deep into the spiritual aspects, and he did mathematical calculations on the chakras and showed that once you go above the root chakra, the speed of light in these chakras goes up to many multiples of the speed of light. And ultimately, the chakra system is a dimensional model. So you take the chakra system and you have extremely high vibration at the crown chakra, stepping itself down into a progressively lower state of vibration. So the root chakra is linked to your bones. So there's your slowest, most dense vibration, which some consciousness researchers would say that's the crystallization of consciousness. So the other analogy that's used is, just as dew forms, our thoughts become embodied. And so what is sort of vaporous, air-like, becomes tears or joy, and posture and gesture. And so there you see the formation of something more concentrated like dew. And so in Spirit Gem, I show models that go, I won't go through it all to because it'd be a lot to talk about, but I show you that some of the research that I've done and some of the great scientists that were very spiritually evolved, like Fred Alan Wolfe and David Bohm, are examples. But they've given us proposals. The problem is we just don't have equipment that can measure the types of rates of vibration. But I believe that the source is infinite, so you can't measure it anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I often think of that time dimension that you're talking about, that fourth dimension that comes down as this spiral sort of shape where you're making that turn and coming back in a cycle, but it's not a complete circle, right?
No,
It's
it's a
that
spiral, like you said. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, it is absolutely fascinating. And I keep coming back to the idea that our body is that antenna for that potential.
Totally.
And
And the DNA is a cosmic antenna.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Our DNA, our cell membranes, our fascia. I mean, I talk a lot about
Yes,
fascia.
you got great stuff on the fascia. Very good job on the fascia.
Thank you. It's exciting. It's
Yeah.
exciting. When I was in school, that was the part in cadaver lab that we would remove because it was useless, right?
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore. I mean, it is this liquid crystalline, semiconductive. It can create its own electrical charge. It's piezoelectric. It's completely covered in this water, this liquid crystalline water. And when you look at the body and all these liquid crystal structures, just like you're talking about this potential then into do, that's what we see in the body. We see these waves of vibration that come into these transducers in the body, these liquid crystalline structures, DNA, cell membranes, fascia, and they're all lined with that dew. They're all lined with this liquid crystalline water. And it's this bridge. I mean, Albert St. Georgi talked about this donor bridge acceptor model where you have donors of energy, and he was talking specifically about electrons, but I think we can expand on that, and bridges, these liquid crystalline structures, and acceptors. And it's kind of like cars on a highway, right? We want cars to be able to drive on the highway. We want the highway to be built, and we want parking lots for them to go into, this model of flow, basically. And it's incredible when you start looking at what is that. I was talking with someone just the other day about the research from Gerald Pollack and Zhang Li on the heart and how circulation. They have done experiments where they stop the heart in chicken embryos, and if they are exposing that to infrared energy, the sun is our biggest source of infrared energy. We're creating infrared energy all the time in our body. That infrared energy, if it is being, if that embryo is exposed to infrared energy, that blood will circulate after the heart has stopped for over 50 minutes. There's this energy flow that we think is strictly matter, but there's an energetic component for sure. And when you're talking about these different structures and dimensions, I'm obsessed with turning it into what's happening in the body. So I think, yes, we have these etheric, these waves of information of all kinds, and kinds that we don't know about and may never know about, that come in contact with these transducers covered by this incredible liquid crystal water. And that makes biological action in the body. It's fascinating. We're receivers.
Yeah. The other thing too, this is getting spiritual. Whatever the source potential is that we're talking about, whether it's be stepping down in a dimensional model or whether we're corks in the ocean of consciousness or source or potential, I think one of the magic aspects of the mystery is that ultimately, whatever it is us. to put it another way, if we use the word God for source, just because for most people that means the highest power, then there can't be anything here that isn't made a source, because it is the source. You know, it doesn't matter how far you take bottles of water from Evian, France. You're drinking France. You're drinking the water from France. So, you know, the metaphor is, if that's God, Evian, the water from the spring of Evian, wherever it is and whatever it is, here you are. And so I think why spiritual development, research and development is so important is because that's really the only way that we can get back. And as you know, if you start studying the mystics, I mean, one of probably the most quoted mystic by quantum physicists ever is Plotinus. And Plotinus was a Greek metaphysician and spiritual teacher who lived about 2,400 years ago. And he gave the best descriptions of the soul that I've read by far. And quantum physicists refer to his writings to substantiate what their research is showing and to say, look, here, this guy was talking about this a long time ago. And so the point I'm bringing up is that when we go inside of ourselves and we go through ourselves and we expand ourselves, we can go down all the way to the atom. If you haven't read the book, The Secret Life of Nature, it's mind-blowing. I think is it Peter Tompkins or Christopher Bird? They're the same guys that wrote The Secret Life of Plants. Do you remember which one wrote The Secret Life of Nature?
No, I don't, but I'm familiar with both. Yeah.
It's a freaking good book, man. Well, he features a Canadian psychologist. His first name's Ron. I can't remember his last name right now, but he was a Buddhist practitioner who spent many years doing a specific type of meditative practice. But he developed the ability to actually see all the way down to the electron. And in The Secret Life of Nature, he drew diagrams of what he was seeing. And then physicists and quantum physicists later validated that's exactly what he was looking at. C.W. Ledbetter did that. Madame Blavatsky did that. And so we have the ability to go all the way down to literally to the wave dimension and all the way up to seeing the universe. I'm a remote viewer, so I know these things are real, but it brings up a point that Rudolf Steiner said, and, you know, I'm sure you're probably aware Steiner told us that the heart was not a pump in about 1860 or 70 and explained why. And now they're proving him right. But Steiner said, and I've shared this on my podcast many times before, so if you're a regular listener, forgive me for being redundant, but it fits the situation. Steiner said, human beings will continue to invent technologies outside of themselves until they either destroy the world or realize everything they've invented outside of themselves is an inferior copy of what's inside of themselves. So if you think how powerful the James Webb telescope is, well, it's still not as powerful as a remote viewer, because a remote viewer can see everything the James Webb telescope is seeing without billions of dollars worth of technology tied to it. You can sit quietly in your backyard or in your house and see anything. As long as you have a place you can direct your consciousness, it'll go there. So I think ultimately where the science is taking an external view, looking at the matter, looking at the atoms, looking at the energy. But spirituality says, let's take it the inner path and let's use the technology that we have inside of us. And the same thing we're trying to figure out, which we'll call source, is what's inside of us.
Yeah.
Pretending to not know. Hello, everybody. I sure hope you're enjoying the podcast as much as I am. I got something really cool to share with you. I think all of you know I'm not a biohacking type guy at all. I'm a bioharmonizer. Not too long ago, my buddy Aubrey Marcus turned me on to something really cool called Correct Fuel, and it's a great way to enhance your workout, support your metabolism,
and just get more out of everything that you're doing. And not only that, for a product with ketone metabolites in it, it tastes damn good, which is hard to do. I'm super excited about it. And I really love knowing that I can take something that's good for me and good for my body and will help me lift bigger stones and have a better workout and show the young man how to do it. So, Aubrey, congratulations on such an amazing product. What would you like to share with the audience just so they know more about how it works and anything specific you think is important to share?
Competitive athletics has been a part of my life since I was a kid. And there's certain things that we deplete ourselves of when we're sweating, when we're out in the sun. For me, it's pickleball or basketball or volleyball, beach volleyball. So I wanted to start with an electrolyte mix that I really felt captured the main electrolytes like you would get in a normal electrolyte packet: magnesium, potassium, calcium. Replenish your body with that. But I know that that's not enough. I wanted to have all of the trace minerals that come from sea salt. We actually took an extract called aquamin, which comes from the sea. So we're getting all of those trace minerals as well as those core electrolytes. And then adding those exogenous ketones, the GoBHB, that actually give you the ketone energy, which is the second fuel source for the body. So it increases your mental clarity and acuity, especially for, athletic sports where you're paying attention. That's super important to have that kind of mental clarity, as well as physical energy that you get. And to round this all out, we found an extract actually from, green beans that actually increases the body's ability to burn our own fat as fuel. So while this isn't designed for anything for weight loss, it's designed to maximize energy. But what if we could put all this together, make it taste great, and then allow people to actually push as hard as they want to push, whether that's athletically or whether that's just restoring your body after you've sweat through the night and lost.
Or cleaning your house.
Clean your damn house. Make your damn bed.
Yeah. Well, I love it. It's awesome. And, I'm very shy, as you know, about anything biohack-like. And I really say you've done a great job with correct energy and correct fuel of bioharmonizing. So I tip my hat to you, brother. And for any of you that wants to try correct fuel, go to korrectlife.com/Spirit Gym. Get 15% off your first order. And while you're there, check out Correct Energy too. Aho, great spirit. Thanks, Aubrey.
You're welcome.
That's where I went all in. Some of the early research on quantum biology in the early 2000s, they were looking at how a photon of light gets through a photosynthetic bacterium to that photosynthesis center, that photoreactive center for photosynthesis to occur. And they found all these things. Okay, there's quantum tunneling, there's quantum superposition, so that that photon of light can take multiple paths, it can go through obstacles. But the thing that made me really excited to read the research is that all the proteins in this bacterium vibrated together, and the photon wasn't taking one path. It doesn't enter in one place, right? It just depends where the light is coming in. Mm-hmm. And wherever it was coming in, those proteins vibrated in unison in a specific way, depending on the situation, to get that photon of light to that center in the fastest way possible. There was this, to me, example of intelligence that came from what we're talking about now.
Yes, and the note I'm writing on my page here is you hit on exactly that earlier. Humming, chanting, toning, and singing. There's nothing more powerful than your own voice to bring your cells into harmony. And then you go into sympathetic resonance. So if you, for example, if you're thinking about a deity, maybe Krishna or Ganesh or Jesus, Christ would be a better one than Jesus because of the non-local reality of Christ. Christ is not a man. Christ is one who is united with the all. It's a title. It means somebody who's become one with God and is conscious of that reality. But when I've looked at research on prayer, for example, Larry Dossey has a fantastic book, all of research on prayer, and it's mind-blowing what they've done through scientific research on prayer. even in hospitals and under double-blind conditions. But the point is if your intention aligns with a source or a deity that is, let's call it unconditional love, and your prayer is carried on the field of intention that attaches itself to unconditional love, you're going into resonance with a very, very high vibration. And I think that is exactly why yogis end up being able to levitate. And you see, I've got loads of books and I've seen many documentaries with the things that yogis and Tibetan monks can do. You might not be familiar, but have you ever heard of Joseph Rael, the famous shaman artist, and he builds sound chambers?
Yeah.
I've got his 5 VHS tapes, but I think they did put it out on DVD eventually. But he talks about when he was a child, his father was a shaman, and his father was teaching the kids. And he describes how one day his dad had the kids around the fire, and they were in their pueblo, so they had, like the pueblo buildings, not tents. They're not made of cloth or skin. They're made of clay and things like that. And his father said, I want you to watch what I'm about to do. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to another dimension, and I'm going to bring something back to you. And Joseph Rael describes watching his father walk right through the wall of their home. And then a few minutes later, he came back through the wall and he handed each of the kids a flower. And he said, this came from another dimension. And I can't remember if he mentioned what dimension it was. But the point is he has to raise his vibration high enough to cross through a material wall. And I've had, billions of out-of-body experiences. I can go right through a wall like it's not even there. You can go through lead like it's not even there. And so I think what I want to make clear to the listeners and what I'm sharing here is that when you're talking about these proteins and how they're coming into harmony with each other, which is really resonance, which is a state of coherence.
Absolutely.
So when our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our behaviors are in alignment, we're in a coherent state. It's very hard for a person like that to get sick. And they're very efficient at drawing energy from sunlight, from sound, from water, because they don't have any limitations to the flow. Fear is actually like a giant resistor in a circuit. And it causes things to back up and vibrate and go into a state of chaos. Yeah. So the thing that I love about all this stuff and what you share in your book is that ultimately you're giving a scientific explanation for what people like Joseph Rael, Paramahansa Yogananda, Sri Yukteswar, Hazrat Inyat Khan, and I could give you a long list of names that were capable of not only doing these things, but explaining them, in terms that are only now becoming accepted by science, and science is the one that has forever said these people were crazy or they were out of their mind or they were, all sorts of negative descriptors. But now they're having to face the mirror, and I think what you've done is you've written a book that allows us to, what I would say, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I would say that what you've given us is a scientific approach to practical spirituality that we don't have to call spirituality, because anybody that does what you're teaching in your book opens like a flower to the higher dimensions of reality. And just like a plant knows where the sun is, and we grow in our consciousness, we grow in our awareness, we grow in our mindset, I think that by doing these practices, we are drawn into our potential and drawn into a conscious awareness of what we're capable of. And like, what did you do? You got sick and you learned, if I use my mind right, my breath right, my body right, and I do the things that are coherent with the principles of nature, I can overcome this illness. So you grew through the illness. The pain teacher came to guide you and teach you more about who you are. And now look what you do. You help everybody you can.
I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think that when I see a patient in front of me, they leave with this descriptive, prescriptive list of, go circadian biology and grounding and this and that. And it's this chore. And I sort of, cackle on the inside as they leave, because I know that that list is an invitation to deepen that understanding, to cultivate a relationship with themselves, to return to that relationship that we have had for so long as humans with the natural world. I mean, talk about tuning forks. We fear is just that glove over a tuning fork.
Yeah.
And going outside and deeply resonating and cultivating and nurturing a relationship with our natural world is one of the most overlooked ways to elevate our health. And you can see it almost everywhere you go. Modern life has done an incredible job of putting up obstacles to these relationships, both internally and externally. This distracted, scrolling, you walk into a room and everyone's together, but they're all on their screens, the artificial walls we live in, the artificial lights, the food, the consumption of these ideas that modern life is putting into our heads. It's just, again, that glove over our tuning fork. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to hopefully reach people to unpeel that glove and to tune that resonance so that we can rise together. I think many of us are feeling at this time that the momentum is gathering, that things are different, things are critical. And what do we need to do right now? We need to reach out to each other. We need to hand in hand help each other be healthy for what's next.
Yeah. And what's next is, I believe the most important what's next is us awakening to the fact that whatever we are, we're an expression of source. And ultimately, that's the one thing that binds us together. And I think part of that step is getting past dogmatic ideologies of religion, where believing in a God that burns you in hell, and keeps a record of all your sins and all this stuff, because that is probably the number one source of fear in people's lives. 85% of the world population has religious affiliation. So we've got a lot of these very, very confused notions about God. And so I think that metaphorically, God's medicine for the misunderstanding of religious ideology is spirituality, which is really about connecting to a progressively greater whole, however you do it, through making love, making music, eating good food, singing, dancing, prayer, meditation. I think God's sense of humor is that there's as many ways to God as you can imagine. The thing is just, as I say to people, fear never makes a good seeing eye dog. So if you're behaving to follow the dictates of a religious God, but it's stopping you from living, then you got the wrong God.
Yeah, I think that fear, shame is another one, right?
Absolutely.
That's coupled with that. That is, again, this glove, this blindfold over our true sight. And I am excited for people to have the opportunity to take off those gloves, take off that blindfold, because I think that that's what we need. And it doesn't mean, I love that you said that God's sense of humor is that there's, is infinite ways to get there. Right. And that's one of the joys of being human, is to find those ways that resonate and those ways that are particularly individual to us. I think the idea of coherence speaks to that, right? Multiple individual molecules of water forming a wave that travels the ocean, this idea of individuality in a unified whole, working together as a collective. And I mean, how badly do we need that right now?
Yeah, well, just like you went through your own, crisis, the wounded path of the wounded healer, and it gave you the inspiration and motivation to look deeper into yourself and what you could do for yourself. I think we're all going through a collective rite of passage where we're being encouraged because we have to face up to what we've created based on the mindset that we've been given or programmed with or fallen into, because it's just easy to believe and not actually do the work of investigating and thinking outside of the box and risking being wrong. Everybody wants to be so comfortable that just memorize stuff and call that fact or religion or science. But the reality of it is that collectively, if you think of humanity as each person as a cell in one large being called humanity, well, right now that being's going through a very serious health crisis. And it's also got to come face to face with what it's done to our ecosystems, Mother Nature, the foundation of our physical existence. And the question is always, as you know, as a doctor, how far down the rabbit hole does someone have to go before they finally say, okay, I got to stop this and I got to do something different? And this is where we get the saying of drug addicts hitting bottom. You can try all you want to tell them how they're screwing their life up or what they could do better, but until they hit bottom, they're never going to listen. And so the question is, how far down the rabbit hole do we have to go? And can we wake up together, dance, sing, and have a common objective together, which I think first has to be taking care of the planet, because we can't get healthy if we don't work collectively to take care of Mother Nature. Yeah. And I think once we realize that, then it won't matter what color you are, what race you are, what creed you are, what religion you are. It's like we need to know how the soil functions and how to take care of it. We need to protect the water. We got to protect the sky. We have to protect the food supply. And when you look at books like George Watson's book, Nutrition in Your Mind, and there's many books in my library showing what happens with even minor nutritional improvements in prisoners and psychologically damaged people. Once we start understanding how important the food, the water, and the air is, what I would call the foundation of life, and we realize we've all got to protect that together. Now we've got a unified field that brings us into a state of coherence because we have a common love. We have a common understanding that's more important than our individuality is. It's more important to, clean the water with the person standing next to you, no matter what they believe or what clothes they wear. And I ultimately think that's where we're headed. We have to, or we're going to wake up in another dimension and go, well, we just fucked up another planet. What do we do now?
It's the time of year when many of us refocus and recommit to lose weight, improve our fitness, and in general set new health goals for the coming year. The problem is that typically these resolutions don't last beyond the end of the month. And that's not because people lack information. Most people know what to do, but they struggle because they've become disconnected from their body's wisdom and from their own inner voice. And that's why Paul created Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1. Yes, you'll learn the fundamentals of breathing, eating, moving, sleeping, drinking, and thinking. These are the 6 Chek Foundation principles, which are guided by the 4 doctors, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. But more importantly, HLC1 is not just another course or program. It's a powerful immersion to help you get in harmony with your unique design. It's practical, it's experiential, and it's deeply transformational. So join us this March at the Rainbow House in Southern California for 3 days led by Angie Chek. If you're a coach, a practitioner, or someone simply ready to take ownership of your life and your health, this is your next step. Spaces are limited as we keep the group small so everyone gets personal attention. Visit paul.chekinstitute.com for more details and to claim your seat. That's paul.chekinstitute.com to sign up for Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1.
I completely agree. And that's one of the things that for me is exciting about this quantum biology perspective. The more you go down to the smallest pieces of life, these electrons, these quarks, right? The more you go down, you see how inseparable everything is. You see how interconnected everything is. You see that we don't end at the barriers of our skin. We are
Right.
intimately connected with everything. And because of that, we are in this reciprocal relationship where we must nurture and cultivate and co-create. And that is the way out. And if you think of what science has given us so far, this narrative of separation, this narrative of we're a machine made up of parts. We are individuals that have friction, that all of this incredible miracle of life is a product of randomness.
Yeah, well, that's just
that right there. That is a recipe for some of the illness that we see nowadays. And that's what I'm excited about with this perspective, is that it instills this idea of interconnection, not only this responsibility to take care of ourselves and the people around us and the earth that we live on, but to return to that idea of awe, and that this is a miracle, and randomness is not the explanation for it.
No. I'm going to share something with you that I think you will find fascinating, especially with what I've learned about your mind and how it works and what interests you and from reading your book. And I had this question in my mind while I was reading your book. I said, I got to ask Catherine if she's ever read this book. Have you ever read the book, The Unknown Spirit by nuclear physicist Jean Charon?
No, but I guess I need to.
You will be blown away. Jean Charon he worked with Einstein directly. He was a nuclear physicist. He was involved in all the research that Einstein was doing back in the day. Charon wrote this book a long time ago. You can still get the book because I've given it to gifts for people a couple of times. You can find used copies. He wrote 2 books, one, maybe 3. One of them, the second one, was more of a simplified version. But the point is, Charon was a very spiritual man. He was a French scientist. And he gave the mathematical rationale for the fact that electrons are conscious and that they have free will and that they know what they're doing. And that he even speaks of love as the binding force, and that electrons have will. He showed that as an electron moves through time, it goes into a state of negentropy, and that the electron actually has 2 dimensions. That one part of it's in the physical dimension, the other part's in a different dimension, and that the entire history of the electron is being recorded, and that is part of the consciousness of the universe. But as the electron's moving through time, for example, if we said our body was an electron, what Charon's showing is as our body is decaying, in another dimension, we're actually becoming more coherent and going backwards in time. So he gives these very interesting explanations, and he simplifies all the math, but somebody like that talking about that in the era when he was doing all this research with Einstein probably would have just gotten locked up in a nut house. But it's very amazing to read this by a nuclear physicist and to see how thorough his explanations are. And then you look at Nassim Harameyn's work with the proton, and you start putting all these pieces together, and then you begin to have a scientific explanation for God. And I think ultimately science is going to come face to face with a thing that's going to be very challenging for it. They're going to prove the existence of God. And I think that's going to be the end of dogmatic religion and the beginning of the world becoming spiritual, because the left brainers and the right brainers will both be celebrating.
I really love Nassim's work. And for me, it brought into context what's happening inside of our body, right? This fascial web that I talk about. And it creates these little tubules. They're called tropocollagen nanotubules. I mean, they're very, very small. Triple helixes, like a DNA is a double helix, but they're a triple helix. And they're completely covered in this liquid crystalline water on the outside, on the inside. And Gerald Pollack has done incredible research showing that in the environment of infrared energy, this liquid crystal water will form this battery. And we can talk about that more, but just simply put, it forms this electrical battery that propels water particles, but also protons throughout this fascial web. And pairing that with Nassim's work and how much information a proton can hold. We're so used to thinking about electricity, electrical fields, and electrons. But when protons move, I mean, there are proton motors out there. It's being investigated for alternative sources of energy. So you have this energetic flow throughout the fascial network, matching the meridians with these protons that are basically, according to his work, black holes holding the information of the universe in them. I mean,
and the scale and variance, he shows mathematically that, well, basically whatever's true for a proton is true for an entire universe all the way up, no matter what scale you're at. And I even think he says that the universe could have come from a single proton. But you know, have you, Catherine, by chance ever studied Tantra and the Nada Bindu point?
Not that point.
You'd find it deeply fascinating. I alluded to it in my 2026 podcast, but I have some very elaborate diagrams and explanations. Tantra is just a stunningly beautiful myth, but there's some great books I have in my library. At some point, if you're interested, I can give you a couple of recommendations. But when you look into what Tantra says, the Nada Bindu point, basically, just like you have the Planck length, which is what, 10 to the minus 34, isn't it? 10 to the minus 34 centimeters, which is considered to be the smallest that something can become before it's not in the physical dimension anymore. But I don't think that's correct. And Nassim has a lot on the Planck length in his talks and stuff, but based on Tantra, the point, the Nada Bindu point, so Nada, it means sound, seed, point.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes.
So Nada Bindu, if you go down to the dimension of the point, which is infinitely small, has no mass, but yet location, and we use it all the time. If I say, Catherine, did you get the point? You know what I mean? If I say the race begins at point A and ends at point B, you know what you mean? Every story begins at a point and ends at a point. So when you actually start really looking into what the concept of the point is, it opens up a huge dimension of spiritual understanding and awakening. And what I did is I coupled Tantra with David Bohm's work and showed that if what I understand of Bohm and what I understand of Tantra are put together, the implicate order, which is the spirit dimension, transitions from what would be called Shakti, the womb, intelligent energy, transitions into the manifest realm, which would be Shiva, at the point. And so something interesting just to share with you and the audience is I was recently talking to my soul and asking questions, and my soul will teach me things all the time. And I said, could you show me the self? Because when I ever look into myself and turn my clairvoyance inward, I see what looks like a star. And so and then you have the Merkaba from Egyptian philosophy or Egyptian religion. And so I was saying to my soul, is this concept of the Merkaba correct? And my soul said, yes, it is. I said, so when I think of what I am as a self, is the Merkaba the star that I see when I look inside of myself that you say is you, myself? And the answer was yes. So I said, would you show me the Merkaba? So my soul showed me that the bottom triangle is feminine, and it's related to the element water. And the top triangle, the one that comes up from the bottom with the pyramid going up, is fire. And so you've got the feminine going down, and it's interpainted by the masculine, and they each rotate in opposite directions. And I said, why are they rotating in opposite directions? And my soul said, because it creates an electromagnetic field. And that stabilizes your body so that your soul can have an anchor. Without that electromagnetic field, there would be nothing to hold your soul in your body, and you'd be everywhere in the universe simultaneously. And then I said to my soul, how big is that star that I'm seeing? You've made it so I could see it. How big is it? And this is the punchline. My soul said, it's the size of a point. It's a spark of God. That what you really are is a spark of God. What you call your spirit and your soul or yourself is the size of a point. And I went, oh my God. So does that correlate to the Nada Bindu point? My soul said, that is the Nada Bindu point.
Incredible.
And so, and this is why I love Steiner's concept of spiritual research. Mm-hmm. I've spent most of my life running into huge questions and then saying, okay, I can't find the answers in books. What do? I got to go inside.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I love about your book is because it's very hard for people that aren't healthy, that are out of balance, that are afraid, that are worried about whether they can, get through the day because they're tired or their body hurts or they're on drugs or they're struggling financially. It's very hard for them to get coherent enough and stable enough to use the innate gifts that we have, because to use your voyances almost always requires that your biological body is nourished and stable. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the negative bias of the body will keep pulling you back. What are you doing out roaming around in the stars when you're not eating right or you're tired? So my point is, I think books like yours are very important because they give a scientific rationale for the ways we can take care of ourselves. And when we do it, I think we spontaneously begin having spiritual experiences or legitimate religious experiences that open us up to the mystery and the majesty of the higher truths of ourself. And I think, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you and help a lot of people learn about your book is because I think it's really important now that we love ourselves enough to educate ourselves well enough to take care of ourselves and our children, which you can't do without taking care of the planet or the environment or your garden or your, organic farmer. Yeah. But once we, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or you look at Claire Graves' values tree, the more unhealthy you are, the more toward the bottom of the pyramid you go. Mm-hmm. And what Claire Graves showed in his research is that once you reach the beige values meme, you're now a dependent. Your family has to take care of you. Yeah. So if you're not taking care of yourself and you're a parent or you're a teacher or you're a doctor or you're a therapist, you're going to turn yourself into a codependent, and everybody else has to take care of you. But we've got so many unhealthy people in the world. The question is, who is going to take care of everybody when there's not enough healthy people around to carry the load of the midwifery or the work of the doctor? And I think that's one of the things that we have to be very careful with, all this mechanized, make everything easier, AI. It's taking us into a state where we're becoming reliant on external sources to answer the questions that are better answered within ourselves. And most of the questions we need to answer first is, why does my digestion not work? Why can't I poop normally? Why do I have heart palpitations? Why do I get headaches? Why do my eyes not work very well? Why can't I hear very well? and on goes the list. Those are all the body trying to guide us back to these fundamental principles. And like you said, you don't need to be an expert in science, because ultimately the science in your book points us right back to these natural practices.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is saying, this is what's actually happening when you're breathing right. This is what's happening when you're drinking quality water. This is what's happening when you're eating real food.
Yeah.
This is what's happening when you're standing in the sun.
Yeah.
And it sometimes it takes people a very good scientific explanation to embrace the obvious.
Yeah, no, and I hope to, I filled it with research and science and validation, and each chapter then is filled with practical steps, just wherever we need to get in. Like, do you need the science? Do you need the steps? Just a list of things. But I think you're right. And I talk about this some towards the end of the book, that we are antenna. Our physical body and the health of our body, and especially the water within, is that receiver. So for us to cultivate those states that you're talking about, we have to have that physical receiver. We have to have that antenna to pick up on those frequencies. And it's exciting that science is starting to validate that. I mean, I love Irina Kosik's work and the resonant recognition model, where our proteins, our cells, our enzymes are vibrating at a certain resonance. And like a tuning fork, we can transfer that energy and information to a different part of the body. And it is almost instantaneous. And it not only is information, but it's energy for that information. So within that signal, if you're saying, do this action, there's also energy in that communication for the action to occur.
Yes.
But if we have, I keep saying the word liquid crystal. We have liquid crystal technology in our screens, right? That's why we are here and I get
Talking
to
to
see
each other.
you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Where all the molecules are aligned in a certain orientation, and an electrical impulse comes in and they shift and they allow a different amount of light in to make these pictures. When they're manufacturing these liquid crystalline technologies and parts of our screens, our computer screens, our phone screens, they have to be really careful to not get these things dirty, or they won't work, right? And so if we're talking about our bodies as liquid crystalline structures, we have to be really careful to maintain health there. We have to make sure that our receivers are clean. And I think that a lot of the quantum biology research, especially in the early decades, in the early 2000s, in that first 10 years, all of it was directed to how do we emulate the perfection in a human system or a living system, so that we can use it for technology, right? Exactly what you're talking about, that we are the technology. And so supporting ourselves, and however you need to do that, if you need a list, if you need science, if you need some philosophy and spirituality, whatever it is that brings you in, it's time that we tend to ourselves, tend to each other, and tend to this earth that we live on.
And I think too, a lot of people are overwhelmed and confused because there's so many things going wrong and there's so much conflicting information. I have empathy for the average person out there, because they're kind of like children lost in a giant shopping mall and they can't find their mom and dad and they're scared to death. And then bombs are going off in the shopping mall and terrorists are showing up and people are trying to force vaccinate them and whatever else is going on in that shopping mall. So people are just like in freeze mode. But I think the way through all of this, whether it be how do I get over my digestive issues or my autoimmune disorder, is that the heart is our ultimate compass. It's the compass of the soul. And so I got taught one of the most profound things I got taught was by one of my students. And she was from Singapore. Excuse me. She came into my holistic lifestyle coach level 2 training program. And the instant she walked through the door, I was shocked. I was shocked because when I looked at her, I saw the most incredible energy field I've ever seen in my life. It looked like a perfectly translucent diamond. And it radiated almost not even white, translucent light. And it filled the room. And I went, oh my God, who is this girl? And why is she in my class? And so the first thing I did is I put my stuff down. I walked over to her and introduced myself to her and said, I described what I saw. And she says, oh my God, nobody's ever told me that before. She goes, thank you so much. I said, do you mind if I take you in my office next door and ask you a few questions? I had to know, what is she doing? And so she said, well, Paul, it's so amazing that you're asking. She said, 3 years ago, I really felt lost in my life and felt like I needed to find a spiritual master. And I was led to this teacher. And the only thing he teaches us, his only one practice, is to use your heart to feel what you know. And she wrote it down for me on a piece of paper in Chinese, and it's right there on the wall. And it's over there on one of my paintings. And I began making that a core focus of my practice. And then having studied heart math work, I went, oh my God, she's telling me really what heart math is trying to get us to do from a scientific perspective.
Yeah.
But I think that my point is, if I'm not being clear for everybody, it's very easy to get lost and confused. And there's so many experts that are diametrically opposed. You can't apply quantum physics to this. You can. Water can and can't do this. No matter which way you go, you get loggerheads. But if we really just connect to our heart, what do I need more of? Is it sleep? Yes. Let's start there. How am I eating? Not good enough. Let's start there. I think if we just really focus on the fact that our I is 50% of every we relationship, and we can't do anything meaningful alone. So if we love and care for ourselves, we carry that into every we, and inherently the all grows up, wakes up, cleans up, grows up, and shows up. And I just think that's so important, and people need to know that you have the compass within you, and it's books like you've written, like I've written, and other people like Sayer G that are giving us the science to point us back to the importance of caring for ourselves. But a lot of people are just too down the rabbit hole with too many problems. They don't know where to go. And all I'm saying is just do anything that you can do out of love, because when you do it out of love, the intention is already bringing you into a state of coherence and harmony. And your compass will come online. And just like you figured it out and got yourself healthy, and I have many times in my life, most of mine was bad physical injuries from racing motocross and kickboxing and cliff diving and rodeo riding. And, I'm one of these testosterone junkie dudes, but I got plenty of time with the pain teacher to learn about it. So for some people it's physical, for some people it's, health type stuff. But I have a question for you, Catherine, if I may ask. Are you a mother?
Yeah.
How many kids have you got? What's that?
I said first and foremost. Yes, I'm a mother. I have 3 children. I have, my husband has a daughter from a previous relationship. And then I have 2 children of my own, and they are growing up. They're 12 and 15, and they're incredible. They're all so incredible.
Well, the reason I think maybe you mentioned your book, I had to ask because as I was reading your book, I said, this book feels like it was written by a mother. The way you put the concepts across, it's I feel like I'm being taught by my mother. And I think that's really beautiful because there's such a lack of feminine energy and presence and consciousness and guidance in the world. But I couldn't help but keep feeling like I feel like I'm reading the book of that's written by a mother. She's guiding us, because you write in such a nurturing way. It's like I don't feel like I'm being talked at like a school teacher, or I just feel like it's like mom taking you out into a field and saying, this flower is this, and you can eat this one. And, it's kind of like going on a magical mystery tour of quantum biology, and mom's quietly saying, oh, by the way, you can do this.
I love that. I love that. I think that that's what we need. I mean, what you were talking about with the heart, I think even just being gentle with ourselves is such
Yeah.
powerful medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about this so often, like in my practitioner courses and teaching people, that sometimes we are the best medicine for the person across from us. Just being a safe harbor, being
Yeah.
able to hold their heart in our hands,
Yes.
being able to be that safe space for their emotions, not enter into their emotions with them, but maintain that sort of motherly space
Yeah.
where you are unconditionally held and loved. So I'm so glad that came across
Yeah,
in
it
some
does.
aspect.
It does. If there was no name on the book, I would be willing to bet friends of mine a lot of money that this is written by a woman, because it has mothering energy. I think maybe it's just your presence is in the book, which is beautiful. But I wanted to share that because I think a lot of people need a safe, loving mother in their life, and maybe reading your book is the easy mother relationship they've been looking for, to have a wise mama.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
Before we jump off the water thing, there's some amazing facts about water that most people don't know. We've talked about Pollock's work, and you haven't really stated the EZ zone, which is what produces the polarization of the water molecules to make energy flow. Is there anything else about water you'd like to share before we move on?
Oh my goodness. We could spend this whole time on water. Water is fascinating. For me, water's the bridge for
Mm-hmm.
frequency information.
Yeah.
It captures this energy and information. It can store it. It can transmit it. Uh, Gerald Pollack is a friend, he's a mentor, and he's an incredible researcher. He was the
Yes.
first one to identify that when water comes up to a surface, like our cell membranes, like our fascia, it changes structure, and it forms that negative electrical charge that we were talking about that is so vital to our health. And as it starts to form, one sheet forms against a cell membrane and acts as a template for more sheets to form. And what builds it is that infrared energy, right? We
Mm-hmm.
talked about the sun being the biggest source. When we move, there's a big source there. When we feel love, when we make love, that increases that infrared energy and builds that water zone. And as that
Now I have
builds,
an excuse. Honey, I'm low on easy water.
I'm not sure you need one, but yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, yes. All of that creates infrared energy, snuggling, sitting by a fire, right?
Yeah.
And as that incredible liquid crystal easy water builds, it pushes out a positively charged hydrogen or proton that we were talking about. And that separation of charge, just like in a 9-volt battery, creates potential energy. So we have this energy battery, right, within our bodies. But not only that, it's this repository of electrons. And the interesting thing about it is it creates this network throughout our body. You can't go very far at all before coming into another water molecule. It is this interconnected, we are, 60 to 70% water by weight, but molecularly, if we were to line up all the molecules, we're over 98% water. And so it is this vast network that can shuttle energy where needed. I mean, talking about what we said before, there's a way to look at the body where pain, inflammation, symptoms, disease are a lack of negative charge or a lack deficiency of these electrons. And you have this water network that's not only creating a battery, but it is a reservoir of these electrons that can go here and there. And I think personally, I think it's really exciting, the research about water memory and how water can hold and store information and then transmit it. And so you have this incredible water battery / water antenna. It is sensitive to all spectrums of light. It is sensitive to sound. It's sensitive to electric, magnetic, scalar, EMF, all
Well,
of these
the water
things.
has a frequency receptive range of 65 octaves.
It is so, yeah, there are researchers. One of my favorite pair of researchers right now, Dirk Meijer and Hans Giesink, they have developed this general music theory of the universe. And they have tested thousands and thousands of different substances, living substances, inanimate substances, and they find that there's this structuring of the frequencies, the Hertz frequencies, the vibration, right? If we look at the periodic table, each element has its own vibration, its resonant frequency, like a fingerprint.
Walter Russell showed that. You know that?
Yeah,
Long time ago.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's nothing new, but what they're doing is combing through the research to map these out. And they're finding that there's this patterning, this musical patterning, and it's a 12, it goes beyond the octave, right? It's this 12 interspersed frequencies that are unique to each substance, but the patterning isn't. They seem to go healthy, unhealthy, alternating between healthy and unhealthy. And all of these frequencies, all of these octaves are found in water.
It's very interesting.
It's fascinating. So it seems like water seems to be acting as literally a bridge for frequency. And when I talked to Hans, I had to say, is this right? I cornered him at a conference, and he's delightful and generous with his time. And that is not the words that they use, but that's what they're finding in the research, that all of those frequencies can be found in water as acting as this universal antenna for all this information. It's incredible, water. And I think we're just scratching the surface with water.
Yeah, there's some amazing, because I've studied water quite extensively. I actually teach workshops on how to build water chargers out of stone. I've done crazy stuff with stones and water, and all the water that we have here is charged with my stone water charger. It's actually doubles as a sound chamber. I take my students in there and do chanting and toning work. It'll hold about 25 students, and I can put about 70, somewhere between 55 and 70 5-gallon glass bottles of water.
Wow.
And I carefully constructed it so it produces vortex energy. When you stand in the middle of it, it literally feels like you're got a vortex running right through you. It feels almost like electricity going through you, but it structures the water molecules and makes the water incredible. And so some of the things about water that I would share just to add to our conversation that most people don't know, water, the 65 octaves of reception. One of my friends is got a degree in physics, and he's a super smart guy. And I said to him, Sean, I've got a podcast with him, Sean O'Leary, he's an amazing man. I said, Sean, can you give me the number of hertz that 65 octaves would equate? And the number was so big, I don't even think there's a name for it. He said, Paul, you could say it's just borders on infinity. It's so big. So water is receptive to almost every frequency range you could possibly imagine. Water researchers have found that water updates its information 1 trillion times a second.
Yeah.
So it's like a computer that's updating 1 trillion times a second. Water has an almost infinite memory for any surface that it touches or anything that interacts with it, including psychic information. And it's also, a lot of people don't realize this, but a few years back, now I don't remember exactly how many, maybe 10 years ago, an astronomer got the idea, I wonder how much water there is out in space in the universe, got the frequency of water and tuned the telescopes to pick up that frequency. And what we now see as black space turned blue. And they were able to show that water is everywhere in the universe. It's all over the place. We're literally in water everywhere. Of course, it's dispersed, but it was enough to make the whole space turn blue. And then when you go back to origin myths, the most common thing all tribal peoples around the world said is that we begin in water, and that they speak of God as an ocean or a divine ocean. And so, these are some of the, why I think it's important to have these conversations is because people today get so caught in flatland, and they assume their body, and they just forget about all the miracles that are right inside of them and all around them. Yeah. And it's like when you forget, like I often say to my students, have you ever just pondered what's making your heart beat? You never thought about that. You just assumed that it's just going to keep happening, but you got to say, how does that happen? Yeah. These are the kinds of questions we should be focused on. What's making me breathe? Why is it so hard for me to commit suicide? Because there's something in you that wants to breathe that's actually beyond your conscious program mind. And, I won't elaborate on all that, but like, I think one of the things that you do so well in your book is you show science to help explain what would be a miracle to most people, but now they can start to understand it. And I think once a person understands something, they're more likely to get involved. Mm-hmm. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two things actually, I think, happening there that, yes, I was one of those people. Show me the science and then I'll commit, right? And I think the other piece of it is awe. Awe is medicine.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
Exactly. I mean, when we can instill some awe in our lives about what it means to be human, that holds real value, real healing potential. And so I hope that it does one of those two things or both for people.
I'm sure it will. I mean, it's very clear, very well written. I mean, I would be shocked if a high school student couldn't understand what you put in there. I mean, you got great diagrams. I didn't find it hard. You write like I like to write. Did I send you my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy? I can't remember. You see, I put a lot of effort into the art and the diagrams. I tried to make it as visual as I possibly could so that almost anybody could understand it, Mm-hmm. And I think you've done a great job of doing that as well. Catherine, I am so digging this dialogue with you. You're a fun woman to hang out with. I hope that I get to spend more time with you. We're kind of coming down the pipe here. We still have quite a lot of topics in the outline. We've covered a lot of great stuff. Why don't you sort of wrap it up for us with some of the things that we were going to talk about, and give us an overview of the things that you think the average person out there needs to know about with regard to mitochondria, biophotons, and some of the things we have on the list to talk about, just so that people can get a deeper sense of what kind of gems they can get out of your book.
Yeah, I think those and the microbiome, I think that's a really fun triad to go into, because a lot of what we think about the mitochondria are these small cell inside the cells, these organelles, and they're thought of as a producer of ATP, our cellular energy. And yeah, they do that. They produce ATP, but ATP isn't just an energy source. It's also scaffolding. It's also maintaining that geometric structure of our proteins. And when proteins fold and change conformation, that's where a cell changes its function. So mitochondria are doing incredible things. They're creating reactive oxygen species, reactive nitrogen species, and these form radical pairs that have the potential to have non-local communication. They are foundational in our immune system. All of our sex hormones come from pregnenolone that's produced in the mitochondria. They are instrumental in our metabolism, of course, because they are creating that energy source. And what's happening in a mitochondria is you have that outer membrane, and then you have this squiggly wiggly inner membrane of the mitochondria. And that's where the electron transport chain lives. That's where that ATP is produced. But it's not just ATP that's produced there. There are 5 different protein complexes, and they're creatively named protein complex 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 4th one is ATP synthase. And that is, it looks like the letter T, and it rotates and creates infrared energy as it pulls a proton down to create ATP. Right next to it, that 4th protein complex creates water. So within the mitochondria, you have this source of water and infrared energy, those 2 vital ingredients for that liquid crystalline water. So they're also playing a foundational role in that liquid network that we have within us. They are sensitive to light. They're sensitive to sound. They're sensitive to our thoughts and emotions. Our internal emotional state can increase our cellular energy, or it can act as an obstacle and downgrade our energy. I talk about how light affects them, how sound affects them. One of the interesting things that gets into that biophoton realm is that our mitochondria create biophotons, these very small emissions of light in the body, in the ultraviolet specifically range of light in the body. And when you look at mitochondria, some of the new emerging research shows us that they're communicating with light. Now, Fritz Albert Popp has always talked about that, right? But now we have some really exciting research. I mean, Gerswich did that initial research study with onions where he showed that there was this light communication, this biophoton communication. That research study was replicated with mitochondria.
Wow.
So they had, it's exciting. They had 2 Petri dishes filled with mitochondria. They took one of them and stressed them. They injected it with antimyosin, and that was very stressful for mitochondria. And so they created really strong biophoton emissions. And there's this Goldilocks zone that we see so often in our biology and in life in general, that biophotons follow as well. Really high biophoton emission signals stress. It's kind of like an SOS signal, hey, look at me, I need some help. And really low biophoton emission really signals this degradation, this dysfunctional damaged cell that's on its way to death. But in between them is this coherent biophoton level, this light emission of life. And our mitochondria in this research study, they stressed one Petri dish of mitochondria, and it started really ramping up and emitting a lot of biophotons. And the Petri dish next to it, they weren't touching, but they were close, started emitting a different biophoton emission just because of that initial shock into the first community. And so there was that communication. But then when they put an opaque barrier in between the 2 to stop the light going between that light communication, that signal stopped. That first community was still emitting really strong biophoton communication, but the second community didn't pick up on it and there was no change to their biophoton emission. So now we have evidence that our mitochondria are communicating with light. And I think it's really exciting because it starts to bring in, again, a non-chemical perspective of the body. And when we look at what's happening in the microbiome, we see the digestive tract is lined with enterocytes, these cells that line the digestive tract, and they are rich in mitochondria. And of course, in the digestive tract, we're also talking about the microbiome, these microbes. And all of these things we think of as running on chemical means, right? When you learn about mitochondria in school, it's the Krebs cycle and the citric acid cycle, and how do we take food and create energy with it? Well, going back to Albert St. Georgi, he was one of the first to acknowledge that our food only plays a small part in that. Other things are powering that flow of energy through the mitochondria, and light being one of them. We see so much research coming out about different spectrums of light increasing the efficiency of our mitochondria, the health of our mitochondria, the longevity, the lifespan of our mitochondria. And just so listeners know, there's decades of research showing that any dip in mitochondrial function is associated with almost every modern disease out there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're foundational, right? And what we see in the microbiome is that layer of cells lining our digestive tract. It's rich in mitochondria. Our microbiome is also communicating with light. And in this area, so when we're talking about different spectrums of light, infrared light goes completely through the body. So it's kind of this incredible example where our shadow is that infrared light of ourself, right? That's what makes it through the body. Visible light doesn't go through. Ultraviolet light is a very short wave length of light, and it only penetrates, not that far into our skin. But in the digestive tract, that is rich in all these ultraviolet light sensitive proteins that pick up on ultraviolet light in a place where external ultraviolet light can't penetrate. So, and nature rarely continues to make mistakes. Why do we have all of these light sensitive proteins in areas where ultraviolet light from external areas can't penetrate? Well, we have this biophoton emission from our mitochondria. Our microbiome is emitting all kinds of biophoton emission. And we talked a little bit about the institute that I started last year, the Quantum Biology Health Institute, and we're just now wrapping up that research study on heart coherence and mitochondrial function. Next, I'm really excited to look at the research between mitochondria, melanin, biophoton emission, hopefully mapping out some of this light communication in the body, that it's not just what we're eating, which of course is important. And we could talk about biophotons in food, right? But there's a potential light network, a communication network in the body. And when you're talking about, healing touch or Reiki or some of these touch therapies that we aren't able to explain currently, it makes me wonder, our hands are the biggest emitters of biophotons. So just like that petri dish of stressed mitochondria sending that SOS, are we using biophotons in our healing touch, in our Reiki, to affect healing in the person we're working with or on ourselves? I mean, there's just so much here that we don't know that would be really, really exciting to know. And I talk about all kinds of things with the mitochondria and the microbiome. I think that understanding that the microbiome isn't just this black and white invader kind of mentality that we think of with germs. I think when we look at what they're doing, they actually provide so many different substrates that actually feed into the mitochondria. When we look at certain conditions, we can see that they're creating hydrogen sulfide, they're creating methane. These things can go in and support mitochondrial function. And they're doing this in conditions where there is already mitochondrial dysfunction. And we would call those microbes, pathogenic or dysbiotic, but maybe they're there to help bolster mitochondrial function. Maybe they're there to help this light communication in the body. We see that the microbiome communicates with sound, electricity. It communicates with EMF. It communicates with light. And this is, again, we come to this very reductionistic way of looking at, okay, our mitochondria create energy and they're within this cell and they're in this part, but they are messengers. They are receivers, right? And our immune system seems to be like the post office that takes these messages where they need to be. And our mitochondria are non-local. So when we support mitochondria in one area, it can support mitochondria in a different area of the body. There's so many incredible things that, again, point to the body as a dynamic, energetic transfer of information that isn't just chemical, that isn't random, that is quite beautiful and intelligent.
When you say the mitochondria are non-local, do you mean they're communicating through non-local means like entanglement, or could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, some of it we don't know. Some of it we don't know why. So there's a lot of research out there looking at red light devices, infrared light, and infrared light is wonderfully supportive of our mitochondria. And devices are great, but anytime you go outside, you're enveloped in infrared energy,
Yes.
right? And it's so powerful and supportive of our mitochondria. When we localize that, so when we put mitochondrial support via red light or infrared light, let's say on the back, we can see that there is mitochondrial effects in other places. And this is the work of Glenn Jeffrey out of the University College of London and many researchers looking into mitochondria, because like you experienced and I experienced, they're very exciting and they're relatively new in our understanding of what's happening in the body and how they're not just a source of cellular energy. They're doing much, much more. So we know that there are non-local effects. We know that they are creating reactive species, reactive oxygen, reactive nitrogen species. And these species, every time a molecule of ATP is created, biophoton emission happens. So the mitochondria emits light. It also emits these reactive species that act as messengers, and we can see their effects on the inflammatory balance, the immune system, neurological system, but they also have the potential to act non-locally. So those reactive oxygen species create radical pairs that can quantum entangle. And these spaces are very small, and this entanglement and this possibility is very short-lived, but it can transfer. That's one of the things that I think people are missing when it comes to water, when it comes to quantum mechanics in the body, is I kind of think of it like flickering lights, right? You just kind of pass that light on. So it doesn't have to be this sustained state throughout the body. It can be a spark that ignites the thing next to it, the thing next to that, thing next to this to create this almost instantaneous communication. So when we're talking about non-local mitochondrial effects, we see these reactive species. We see biophoton emission, which can cause non-local, right? We have one petri dish and the other separated petri dish that's not touching that first one, and there's that communication between the two. We see that mitochondria can leave the cell. They can create chains where they tunnel and share electrons. So we have all kinds of possibilities out there that we understand as non-local, and I'm sure that we'll find more as time goes on.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts that came to me while you were sharing there. I think it's important for people to remember that mitochondria are actually bacteria that are in a symbiotic relationship with our body. And, one of the things that popped into my head is I was studying some research, and one of the scientists wanted to investigate what all the stardust is that makes it so hard for them to see with telescopes to see distant galaxies. It might have been Fred Hoyle. I can't remember because I've read so many papers. It's hard for me to remember them all now. But he researched this and found something quite shocking. He found that 95% of the stardust throughout the universe is bacteria.
Wow.
And that, so he's showing, bacteria is really where life emerges from first. And that basically the seeds of life are spread, they're spread throughout the entire universe, and water is essential to life. So when you realize that the clouds of what we think of as stardust is mostly bacteria and there's water throughout the universe, it tells me that life is trying to emerge everywhere throughout the entire universe.
That's incredible. I love that. I want to read that research study. And I think that it's really interesting to note that relationship between water and bacteria and how bacteria can structure water. They can create that liquid crystalline water. And I think that, and then we get into the effects of how bacteria create sound, and that can hold information that possibly is that furthering an evolution of life and different complex, more and more complex beings of living systems held in that bacterium's light, held in their ability to structure water, held in their sound, held in their electromagnetic field, right? Because they're also creating that. It is a fun way to view the body that isn't what I was given in school. When I was taught in naturopathic school, it was, we have germs, they are the invaders, the immune system is the defense. You have an autoimmune condition because your body is attacking itself. It's like just that statement.
You can thank Rockefeller for that education.
Yeah. And what is that instilling? I mean, just telling all of the autoimmune population that they can't trust their bodies.
Right.
I mean, that's some medicine right there, right? That causes just a trickle down effect of illness right there. So I love looking at the microbiome, the mitochondria, the immune system from a lens of cooperation. I mean, if the microbiome, if we look at the soil, we look at regenerative farming, we look at research, we look at science, we look at practices out there where these microbes are giving the soil what it needs.
Absolutely.
Right? It's clear and it's not debated. But when it comes to our bodies, that's an outrageous, controversial thing to say. And that's what I filled the book with, because you can map it out. Like I talk about Alzheimer's and how a lot of these patients have short, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And you look at the bacteria that they have colonizing their gut, and it is doing exactly what you would want to do medically as an intervention. It's giving support to the mitochondria. It's helping them produce more energy. It's helping with gut permeability. It's doing all these things, yet it's labeled as pathogenic. And you try to wipe it out, and it doesn't get better, and the patients don't get better. Maybe what we should be doing is saying, what is the bacteria doing in this condition? And how can we support it? And how can we encourage the same thing with natural interventions?
Yeah. A couple of thoughts came to me. One, we haven't mentioned this. I think it's very important for people to realize. One fast way to wipe out mitochondria is to take antibiotics.
Yeah.
And we, you know very well, we have a serious problem with the overprescription of antibiotics. And now we have super bugs in hospitals that create serious problems, because once they start spreading around, the people they've taken so many antibiotics, the bacteria become antibiotic resistant. Yeah. And I've had to deal with countless patients in my career that had all the symptoms of chronic fatigue and were just, acting like hypothyroid patients, many of which become hypothyroid patients, but they'd been on long courses of antibiotics, sometimes multiple times. Yeah. And so then I have to start, doing work to rebuild the mitochondrial population for them. So I think everybody listening should be very conscious about how many antibiotics you're using, because you can put a serious dent in your energy systems and communication. So everything Catherine's talking about gets damaged. There's another author I'm curious if you know about, and I'm going to give you a little tidbit from one of her 10 or 11 books, all of which I've read. She's an electrical engineer with a PhD, I believe, or a master's degree in theology, named Shelley R. Joy, Joye. Have you ever heard of any of her stuff?
I haven't.
Oh my God. Just go on Amazon and search Shelley R. Joy and look at the titles of the books, and God will talk to you right away. But she makes some very profound points, and with a background in electrical engineering, has a lot of ways to make correlations that other people miss. And one of the things she talks about is the infrared emission from the human body. And she talks about how, due to the way the atmosphere around the planet is constructed, every other wavelength of light gets trapped in the ionosphere. But infrared, there's what's called a band pass, and it turns out to be the frequency range of infrared light. And she shows that every one of us is constantly in communication with the entire universe through infrared light transmission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she also shows something else that I would like people to be aware of. The entire internet runs on fiber optic cable systems that use infrared light in the same frequency of our body. And she warns that the advanced technology that they have out there now, that they can use to control your mind and your emotions, they can tap right into you through the internet, because they're using the same frequency spectrum to send these messages that your body's running on. All that you just talked about mitochondria and photon emission, they can tap right into it, right through your computer screen or your phone, and basically use you like a remote control vehicle.
I didn't remember her name, but I am familiar with her work. And it is, that's how I describe the fascial network. It's like a fiber optic system, right? And yeah, I love that correlation with our infrared selves being able to communicate with the universe.
She really says that when every single bit of infrared light that leaves your body, every single one of us and every living thing on this planet, penetrates the ionosphere and goes forever. And the infrared coming from other sources through the star system is reaching us. So we're through the infrared system, we're in a constant communication with the entire universe.
Incredible.
It is mind-boggling. It's badass. And here's an example of a scientist, a highly skilled technician who spent her life studying theology, has done many ayahuasca and plant medicine ceremonies, has a deep understanding of Jung, Teilhard de Chardin, and many, many others. And she's got lots of great stuff on all these people, on, what is enlightenment? How does it happen? Like I said, I've read all of her books and they're all fantastic. And she's got some stuff in there that I think a lot of people, if they realized, would be a lot more careful with what they let their children interact with as far as social media, phones and televisions and video games, because she makes it very clear that they have the technology to control you. And most people have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. Yep. My children still don't. I mean, it's a rarity to have a 12 and 15-year-old that don't have cell phones and their own social media, but they've got me for a mom. So we still haven't done that yet. And I think that I think it was actually a recent video that you did about the turn of the year and what 2026 holds, where you equate narcissism and the screen technology, where we are just being pulled into this relationship with, and really, I would say maybe it's not even true narcissism, because it's not even ourselves, right? It's this AI odd, and it's just so pervasive. It's
it's all based on the myth of Narcissus, right? Who falls in love with his reflection and then isn't even interested in women. Yeah. And that's a major problem with young men today. They've lost their interest in women. If anyone hasn't listened to or read the books of Harold Sachs, The Lost Boys is one of his books. I think it's Harold Sachs, MD. I can't remember, but Leonard Sachs, MD. I mean, his research he's a medical doctor, and the stuff he unveils about what's going on in young people around the world is just mind-boggling. It's scary. And, and he has a lot on the research on what happens to kids when they're playing video games and spending too much time on social media. It's a very bad looking picture. Yeah. So these are all real things. And I always tell people a phone makes a better tool than a master. But, the whole point of me sharing the myth of Narcissus is that the phone's actually mirroring us back to us and what's AI learning from. It's learning from us.
Yeah.
But it's outsmarting us. So now what they're doing is using AI to draw us in, learn everything about us, so then they can sell us anything, get us to believe anything, control us. And it's extremely dangerous. And I think I've had a couple of podcasts with an expert on AI and technology, Rachel Miles, and they're very, very good. And she's really sharp. She's been one of my students for many years, but she works in the industry developing AI and has worked for major corporations. So I have put podcasts out to help people, understand, to be careful. And she's got a free course anybody can get. I don't have her website on hand, but my podcast team can put information on how to get to Rachel Miles' website. But she's got a beautiful free course you can get on her website, and shows you how to use AI, intelligently, so it doesn't have bad effects on you. Yeah. But these things. One of the things that I hope people have gotten from this podcast, Catherine, is how many absolutely mind-blowingly wild mysteries and how much magic is right in us, around us. Mm-hmm. And, I think if people don't get from this conversation how important it is to spend time in nature and to, breathe fresh air and to, monitor how much time you're spending on computers and screens and games. And I wear these raw optic glasses because they block the negative frequencies of blue light, which is one of the frequencies, according to Jack Kruse, they use to control your mind. Mm-hmm. There's a reason it's designed that way, the computer screens. But Jack Kruse goes into great depth on how, they know exactly what these frequencies are, and they can encode them with information and get you to, want things that you don't need and buy things that you don't want and scare you and trigger fear responses. And, COVID was a great test run for all of that for these evil geniuses. But I think also we have to remember that the function of evil is to point to the good. Without evil, we wouldn't know what the good is. So,
absolutely. I'm sort of hopeful about AI in that way. We've seen an explosion of AI. We see, we can't tell what's real anymore.
Right.
We've got deep fakes. We have all these things, but I have a feeling, maybe it's a hope, but I hope it's a feeling that it will create this craving
for human connection.
Yeah.
And soul.
And soul and the mess that we are. Humans are messy, but beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that this explosion we're seeing in AI, we still don't realize that that's a distorted image of ourselves. Right? It is coming from us. And the original is so much more beautiful. It's so much more intricate. It is that spark of God.
It is.
And that can't be replicated. And so I'm hopeful that it creates this massive return to what it means to be human, to what it means to be embedded in this natural world, living on this planet, doing what we do, loving each other, loving
life
the trees
and
outside.
And nature. Yeah. Well, AI has no microbiome. It doesn't produce biophotons. It doesn't communicate non-locally. And there again, Steiner said you will continue to create outside of yourself until you realize everything's an inferior copy of what's inside of you.
Yeah.
And I think, just from this conversation that you and I have had, we've made it really clear over and over again that we are the universe and the universe is us. And we don't need a digital illusion between that experience. That's, that's like trying to have sex through blankets.
Right.
It takes away the connection. And I think we really need to get back to each other and back to ground zero, so to speak, and really like get our feet in the dirt and our hands in the dirt and really become conscious of the fact that we've got to protect our natural resources because corporations are destroying this stuff. And if you look at what AI data centers do to the environment and water and how much electricity, I mean, we're creating a massive, massive problem for what?
Right.
For what? And so anyhow, I just think these are things that people need to think about. But Catherine, as we close, first, I just want to say thank you. I'm so proud of you and so grateful for you. And you're such a beautiful, loving mama. And it's just been an honor to be able to share you with people and your book. So are there any closing comments you'd like to share, websites, anything you want to share?
Well, I want to express my gratitude, Paul.
Thank you.
It's been absolutely wonderful. It's been wonderful to get to know you and to talk with you and to experience your graciousness and generosity. So thank you.
I just know when I'm looking at God, that's all.
Oh, see, you did it again. But I really appreciate that. And
thank you.
And I'm just, I didn't get creative with my name. You can find me at drcatherineclinton.com. That's who I am on Instagram and YouTube, Facebook. And this is what I talk about. That's what I love to talk about. I think you and I have that shared passion and understanding that, the momentum's gaining. It's time. It's time. And so I'm out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you to all of you. I hope you've enjoyed this amazing journey with Catherine and I. I hope you feel inspired to buy her book and read it. It's a beautiful book. It's well laid out. It's easy to read. It's a gorgeous hardcover book. Look, I'll show you what happens when Paul Chek gets a hold of a book. Now, I'm a guy that knows a lot about this stuff. So most of you that listen to my podcast know, and that's just the beginning. All right. So that's a record of everything I think is very important. And I've got to only 98 pages. So that's me destroying a book and making it useful to me.
That's perfect. That's how I do it too.
And so thanks to all of you. Please, let's do this together. Sing, dance, share your love. Let your heart be your guide. Use your heart to feel what you know. When you're in trouble, ask yourself, what would love do now? And thank you to my sponsors for all your love and support, your amazing, beautiful, high-quality, organic, biodynamic products. Thanks for buying from the sponsors. They support biodynamic, organic, and free-range farmers that take care of our planet and our topsoil, and our animals are treated humanely. And so if you buy from the sponsors, you're loving yourself, you're loving the companies that made that great stuff for you, you're loving the farmers that raised it, you're loving Mother Earth, you're loving me because I get a little bit to run the podcast with, and you're loving yourself. So, aho, everybody wins. And I will look forward to sharing something as awesome as I can next week. I don't know if I can top Catherine, but if I can just match up on something else, then we'll just keep the river of consciousness flowing. And Catherine, if you're ever in the San Diego area, I live in Fallbrook, don't forget to come by and see me. We got 14-acre farm here on top of a mountain with goats and pigs and dogs and cats and chickens and kids and go-karts and bicycles and you name it. So
I look forward to it.
Awesome. All right, you guys, lots of love. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek and today's guest, Dr. Catherine Clinton. Order Catherine's new book, Optimize, and get over $400 in free bonuses, including 60-plus hours of quantum biology masterclasses and Dr. Catherine Clinton's signature course, Unlocking Your Quantum Biology. Go to drcatherineclinton.com/optimize for details. Connect with Catherine on Instagram at dr.catherineclinton, on Facebook at dr.catherineclintonnd, and on YouTube at dr.catherineclinton. For more interaction with Paul and to share ideas and ask questions about the topics discussed in this podcast, we invite you to join his Spirit Gym program and community. You can participate in live Q&A sessions with Paul's podcast guests, access the members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can chat with other members, attend weekly virtual meetups with Paul, and study his comprehensive Master Key online program. Explore the options and subscribe today by going to myspiritgym.com. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.